Welcome, fellow historians, to a journey beyond the known chronicles of the Imperium. We often speak of Paul Atreides, the rise of the God Emperor, and the scattering. The forgotten lore, decipher the cryptic symbols, and piece together the epic sagas that shaped humanity's destiny among the stars. Subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss our first expedition into the deep past. The spice isn't the only treasure Arrakis holds.
They sought to create the future and found their end. Across the millennia, humanity reached perfection, not through gods nor machines, but through its own blood. The Bene Gesserit called it the Kwisatz Haderach, the shortening of the way, a man who could stand where no woman could, see what no mind should, and hold time itself in his gaze. But prophecy is a cost, and every vision of paradise hides a desert of bones beneath it, for in the heart of their dream to control destiny, they birthed the one who would destroy it. They called it evolution, a guided path, a secret thread of blood and prophecy woven through generations of silent births and careful deaths. To the Bene Gesserit, humanity was clay, and the Kwisatz Haderach, the sculpture that would finally breathe, a being who could see beyond space and time, who could bridge the infinite gap between thought and action. But behind that dream lay something darker. For what is perfection, if not the end of change? What is control, if not the death of freedom? In their quest to perfect the human soul, the sisterhood forgot the oldest truth of all, that creation and destruction are the same act. And so we must ask, when humanity reached for its own godhood, did it ascend, or did it finally fall? Long before the birth of Paul Atreides, before the whispers of prophecy and desert storms, humanity stood at the edge of extinction and enlightenment. The Butlerian Jihad had ended. The thinking machines were ash. But in their absence, something far more dangerous remained: the human desire to control. They had overthrown their metal gods, only to build new ones in flesh. In the silence that followed the jihad, the Bene Gesserit rose from the ashes like a priesthood of memory. They saw what others could not, that the human mind, once freed from the machine, would soon become one, not through circuitry, but through breeding, through ritual, through control. They began to shape the future not with algorithms, but with ancestry. Each bloodline became a thread in their great design. Each birth is a calculation. Each marriage is a prophecy disguised as politics. They did not wage wars. They planted them. Empires rose and fell by their whisper, and none could see the pattern they were weaving beneath history's surface. It was not power they sought, but purpose. A purpose that transcended empires, houses, and centuries. To create the Kwisatz Haderach, a mind capable of seeing through all time. To understand their goal, one must understand the fear that birthed it. The Bene Gesserit feared chaos, the unpredictable nature of humanity itself. And so they sought order, absolute and complete, born not of machines but of blood. They envisioned a man who could walk both paths, male and female, light and shadow, uniting the divided halves of human potential. A being who could see the infinite pattern of the universe, and thus guide humanity away from destruction. They called it the shortening of the way, the perfect consciousness, the bridge across the void. But the sisterhood's language was one of faith and fear intertwined, for they knew that such power, once born, could never be controlled. Still, they believed they could tame it, contain godhood within their own design. For 10,000 years, they waited, generations of quiet manipulation, hidden unions, and forgotten heirs. Each child was not a person, but a possibility. And in every generation, the same prayer whispered through the sisterhood's halls: may he come, may he see what we cannot. Yet their dream of perfection carried within it a paradox. For every step toward control demanded another sacrifice of freedom. Every act of order required another birth without choice, another life bound to a plan. They called it duty, but in truth it was fear. For beneath their faith in destiny was a terror of chaos, of a future they could not predict. And so the sisterhood became the very thing humanity had once destroyed, a collective intelligence seeking to master all outcomes. The difference was only one of flesh. Yet destiny does not yield so easily to design. For all their wisdom, the Bene Gesserit failed to see the power of the human heart. They believed in bloodlines, but not in love. They trusted in prophecy, but not in chance. And it was through one act of defiance, a single choice, that their entire design unraveled. Lady Jessica, a concubine trained to obey, bred to bear a daughter, and instead, out of love, she bore a son. In that moment, the sisterhood's grand design collapsed into history's oldest irony. The human heart, unpredictable, imperfect, free, had broken the chain of destiny. And from that act of love, the forbidden dream was born. Paul Atreides, the Kwisatz Haderach. But what happens when the perfect being finally opens his eyes? When prophecy ceases to be a story and becomes a burden, the Bene Gesserit sought to control the future. Paul would see it, and in that vision, he would find their doom. He was not born, he was summoned. Paul Atreides entered the world as a culmination of 10,000 years of calculation, a prophecy in flesh. But the Bene Gesserit had made one fatal error. They believed the Kwisatz Haderach would serve them. They never imagined he might awaken. On Arrakis, the desert stripped away all illusions, and in that emptiness, Paul began to see, not with his eyes, but with something older. Visions unfolded like storms across time, past, present, future, all converging into a single, unbearable truth. He could see every path humanity might take, and every one of them led to blood. That was a paradox. The sisterhood sought to end chaos, but in creating the one who could see it all, they gave birth to a chaos beyond imagining. For omniscience is not power, it is prison. To be the Kwisatz Haderach was not to command the future, but to be trapped within it. Paul saw every possibility, every branching path of fate, and found that all roads curved back toward destruction. He would either become humanity's savior or its tyrant. And in most futures, there was no difference between the two. The sisterhood had imagined a man who would lead humanity wisely. Instead, they had created a man who could no longer believe in choice. Because when all futures are visible, freedom dies. That is the cruel symmetry of the Kwisatz Haderach. To see everything is to lose the ability to change anything. In the desert, Paul's visions burned like suns. He saw legions of fanatics marching beneath his banner. His name turned into religion, his image carved into stone. He saw the Imperium fall, the stars burning in holy war. And he saw himself no longer man, but myth. The dream of perfection was fulfilled through annihilation. What the Bene Gesserit had never understood was that their perfect being would not end humanity's chaos. He would embody it. For the Kwisatz Haderach was both creator and destroyer, born from control, destined for rebellion, a god engineered by mortals who feared gods. And in the silence of his visions, Paul Atreides understood the final irony. The future could not be guided. It could only be endured. Prophecy in the Dune universe is not a gift. It is a curse disguised as knowledge. To see the path ahead is to become bound by it. And so, the Kwisatz Haderach was doomed from a moment of awakening, not by his enemies, but by certainty. Humanity's forbidden dream had succeeded too well. They had created a mind capable of holding the totality of time, and in doing so, they removed the mystery that made life human. Paul did not choose the jihad. He merely stepped into the vision that awaited him, a vision so immense, so all-consuming, that resistance itself became meaningless. He saw billions dying in his name, galaxies burning for his glory, the holy war spreading like fire across the stars. And yet he could not stop it, because every attempt to change the future only ensured it would come to pass. This was the ultimate paradox. To know the future is to bring it into being. The Bene Gesserit dreamed of control. Paul dreamed of escape. But both dreams were illusions born from fear. For the Kwisatz Haderach was not salvation. He was revelation. He showed humanity the cost of its own ambition. They had sought to perfect the human form. Instead, they revealed the fragility of the human spirit. When Paul sees the golden lion throne, he became not the fulfillment of prophecy, but its warning. His empire was built not on vision, but on inevitability, a machine of faith, fueled by destiny itself. And in his reign, Herbert's most profound message emerged. Perfection is the death of evolution. Control is the death of meaning. The Bene Gesserit had tried to end chaos, but chaos is life. They had sought to remove the unknown, but the unknown is the source of hope. In erasing uncertainty, they had erased humanity. Even as Paul ruled the Imperium, even as his name became myth, he knew the truth, that the future he had seen was only the beginning of a far darker age. His prescience had not saved humanity. It had frozen it, trapped in a single, unchanging destiny. He was the bridge they had longed for, and the chasm they could never cross. In trying to see everything, Paul had become blind to the one truth he could never change. The future is only human when it remains unknown. And so, the dream of the Kwisatz Haderach began to decay, not through failure, but through fulfillment. The prophecy had come true, and in doing so, destroyed the meaning of prophecy itself. The Bene Gesserit had built a god to save humanity. Instead, they had shown humanity that godhood was its final trap. But what did Herbert mean by this? Why would he give us a Messiah only to strip him of his freedom? To answer that, we must look beyond the story to the philosophy beneath it. For Herbert was never writing about Paul Atreides alone. He was writing about us. The story of the Kwisatz Haderach is not merely the tale of one man's rise to godhood. It is a reflection of humanity's oldest desire to master the unknown. Across every age and myth and empire alike, mankind has sought to perfect itself, to conquer chaos, to shape destiny, to see beyond time. But every civilization that dreamed of perfection met the same end. The moment it believed itself complete, it began to die. In Dune, Herbert built a universe where humanity destroyed its mechanical gods, only to resurrect them in the form of ideology, bloodline, and prophecy. The Butlerian Jihad had purged the machines, but the need for control, that quiet hunger in the human heart, endured. The Bene Gesserit believed they were safeguarding humanity. They replaced algorithms with breeding charts, data with prophecy, and called it faith. But their system was still a machine, one powered not by electricity, but by fear. Herbert's warning was not about technology. It was about the human mind that builds its own cages. The Kwisatz Haderach was meant to free humanity from ignorance. Instead, he became the final expression of its obsession with control. And through Paul's agony, his godhood without choice, his power without freedom, Herbert showed us what happens when humanity confuses knowledge with wisdom. We begin to see everything, but understand nothing. The human spirit is defined by the unknown, by mystery, by the question that has no answer. It is the not knowing that makes choice possible. It is uncertainty that gives meaning to faith, love, and courage. But the Kwisatz Haderach saw all paths at once. He lived in a universe without mystery, a world where every outcome was visible, every destiny inevitable. And that was his hell. To see all possibilities is to lose the meaning of possibility itself. Herbert used Paul's prescience as an allegory for modern power, our own technological omniscience, our illusion that data, prediction, and control can replace wisdom. We believe that to know more is to be free, but often it only deepens our imprisonment. In trying to master the universe, humanity loses the very thing that makes a human, the capacity to wonder. The Bene Gesserit believed faith could be engineered. They turned religion into architecture, prophecy into politics, myth into manipulation. But in the end, the faith they created outgrew them. This is Herbert's quiet warning. That belief cannot be manufactured without consequence. For once faith becomes a tool, it ceases to be sacred. And what is left is not devotion, but obedience. The Kwisatz Haderach became the god of their own design, but not the god they expected. He revealed that true divinity lies not in control, but in surrender. The desert itself, the heart of Arrakis, symbolizes truth. It devours all structure, all order, all arrogance. Yet from it comes a spice, the substance that fuels civilization, the essence of time itself. Life and death, control and chaos, bound together in endless tension. This is Herbert's cycle. The more we try to escape it, the more we become trapped within it. Every empire in Dune sought to build eternity. Every one of them fell. Because eternity is not the nature of life. Change is. And the dream of perfection, of a single unchanging truth, is the oldest illusion of all. Paul's tragedy is not that he failed, it's that he succeeded, and discovered that success itself was a failure. He became the perfect being the sisterhood had dreamed of, but perfection is sterile. It has no room for growth, for compassion, for doubt. Humanity's strength lies not in certainty, but in struggle, in our ability to err, to learn, to begin again. And so Herbert leaves us with a choice. Do we continue seeking the God within us, or do we finally learn to live without one? Herbert did not write a Messiah story. He wrote an anti-Messiah. Paul's ascension is the very thing the Bene Gesserit feared. Proof that no system, no bloodline, no God can contain the will of life itself. Through Paul, Herbert reminds us that salvation is a human myth, and that power, even in its purest form, corrupts not through cruelty, but through certainty. When the Kwisatz Haderach looked into the abyss of time, he saw not destiny, but reflection. He saw humanity's unending need to dominate, to predict, to know, and he realized that the only way forward was through blindness, the acceptance of limits, the embrace of mystery. It is no coincidence that his son, Leto II, becomes a literal embodiment of control, the God Emperor who rules for millennia, only to sacrifice himself so humanity can finally evolve beyond prediction. The ultimate act of godhood was self-destruction. In Herbert's universe, enlightenment is not victory. It is humility. The Kwisatz Haderach is not just a Dune myth. It is a mirror for our own age. We live in a time when humanity once again reaches for the forbidden dream. Perfect knowledge, perfect systems, perfect control. Artificial intelligence, genetic design, predictive algorithms. The same dream that birthed Paul Atreides now hums in our machines. And the same question lingers, unspoken. Can we see too much? Herbert's answer was clear. Every age believes it can control the future. Every age discovers it cannot. In the attempt to know everything, we destroy the soul that makes knowledge worth having. In the end, the story of the Kwisatz Haderach is not prophecy. It is remembrance, a warning written in myth. For those who would play God with their own creation, Paul Atreides was not the end of the human journey. He was a reminder that it must never end, because the future, the true future, belongs not to the perfect, but to the free. In the desert winds of Arrakis, all things return to dust, even prophecy, even gods. The Bene Gesserit sought to shape perfection, and found that perfection is death. Paul Atreides saw the future, and learned that vision can be a curse. And humanity, as always, stood trembling before its own reflection, wondering if it had gone too far. The Kwisatz Haderach was not humanity's savior. He was its mirror, a reminder that to be human is not to know all things, but to walk blind and still choose to move forward. Because in every age, we reach for the forbidden dream, and in every age it reaches back. Subscribe and remember, history always repeats, even in the Imperium.